The afternoon sun poured through the tall windows of the courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished floor as Emma sat perfectly still on the wooden bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could hear the muffled voices of lawyers and the occasional shuffle of papers from behind the heavy doors, but all she could focus on was the slow, painful thud of her own heartbeat. Today was the day her marriage would officially end, not with tears, not with a fight, but with cold, legal finality. Across from her, Liam adjusted his expensive watch, his face unreadable. He hadn't even looked at her since they'd arrived. Emma swallowed hard, remembering the last 10 years, how they'd met at a friend's party, how he'd charmed her with his easy smile, how he'd promised her the world. She had given up her own dreams to support his business, to host his parties, to smile politely at his important clients. And now he was tossing her aside like a used napkin. The worst part? He wasn't even pretending to be sorry. The door creaked open, and a stern-faced clerk called their names. Liam stood immediately, straightening his suit jacket, as if this were just another business meeting. Emma forced herself to rise, her legs shaky beneath her. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, skimmed the papers in front of her before speaking. "Mr. Carter, are you aware that the prenuptial agreement you both signed limits Ms. Reed's claim to shared assets?" Liam smirked. "Yes, Your Honor. The terms are clear." He turned to Emma, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm sure you understand, Emma. Business is business." Emma's fingers curled into fists. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the hurt she did. But instead, she just nodded. The judge stamped the papers. "Divorce granted. Ms. Reed, under the terms of your agreement, you are not entitled to any of Mr. Carter's assets." Liam didn't wait for her to react. He leaned in, his voice a low, cruel whisper. "You get nothing. Not a dime. The prenup protects me." Then he walked away, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, leaving Emma standing there alone. But as the heavy courthouse doors swung shut behind him, Emma's tears dried. Because suddenly, she remembered something Liam had clearly forgotten. Page 7. And for the first time that day, Emma smiled. The rain had started by the time Emma reached her tiny apartment, the kind of place Liam would have scoffed at, with no marble countertops, no sweeping city views, just a cramped kitchen and a sofa that sagged in the middle. She dropped her keys on the counter, the metallic clatter echoing in the empty space, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders, but beneath the exhaustion, something else simmered. A spark. A thought. Page 7. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides, yanking open the bottom drawer of her desk, where she kept the few important documents she'd managed to take with her when Liam had told her to leave. Beneath old tax files and a folder of recipes she'd once dreamed of turning into a bakery business, her fingers brushed against the thick, cream-colored paper. The prenuptial agreement. She hadn't looked at it in years. Back when they'd signed it, Liam had waved it off like a formality. "Just something my lawyers insist on," he'd said, flashing that easy grin of his. "You'll never need to worry about it." She trusted him then, so she'd skimmed the pages, signed where he pointed, and forgotten about it. Now, she flipped through the document with trembling hands, scanning the dense legal jargon until there. Page 7. Her breath caught. Buried in the middle of a paragraph about asset division was a single sentence, so innocuous it could have been missed by anyone who wasn't looking for it. In the event of proven infidelity, fraud, or material misrepresentation of assets by either party, the offending spouse shall forfeit 50% of all liquid and non-liquid holdings to the injured party. Emma read it again. And again. Her pulse roared in her ears. Liam had been so sure the prenup was his shield, his guarantee that she'd walk away with nothing. But he'd never really read it. He'd assumed his lawyers had covered him, that the fine print was in his favor. But it wasn't. She reached for her phone, her fingers dialing a number she hadn't used in years. Sophia answered on the second ring. "Emma? Wow, it's been." "I need your help," Emma interrupted, her voice steadier than she felt. "I think Liam just made the biggest mistake of his life." There was a pause on the other end. Then, slowly, Sophia said, "Tell me everything." And Emma did. By the time she hung up, the rain had stopped, and the first hints of twilight painted the sky outside her window. For the first time in months, Emma didn't feel like the woman Liam had discarded. She felt like the woman who was about to make him pay. The smell of cinnamon and sugar curled through the cramped kitchen of Emma's tiny apartment, wrapping around her like an old friend as she pulled the first tray of snickerdoodles from the oven. The golden brown cookies glistened under the overhead light, their edges perfectly crisp, just like her grandmother used to make. It had been years since she'd baked for anyone but Liam and his endless parade of business associates, back when she'd played the role of the perfect wife, arranging canapes on silver platters and smiling through hollow compliments about her adorable little hobby. Now, the cookies weren't for show. They were for her. She set the tray on the counter with a quiet clatter, her mind already racing ahead. Sophia had been clear. The clause in the prenup was ironclad, but only if Emma could prove Liam had lied about money, about assets, about anything. And Liam wasn't careless. He was the kind of man who kept secrets locked behind layers of lawyers and offshore accounts, which meant she needed help. The knock at her door came just as she was wiping flour from her hands. Emma hesitated, then crossed the room and peered through the peephole. A man in a rumpled trench coat stood on the other side, his salt and pepper hair slightly windblown, a file tucked under one arm. "Mr. Cole." She opened the door. "You must be Emma," he said, his voice a low rasp, like gravel underfoot. "Sophia said you had a problem." Emma stepped aside to let him in, her pulse quickening. The detective's sharp eyes flicked over her apartment in one swift sweep of the half-packed boxes, the legal documents spread across her coffee table, the tray of cookies still steaming on the counter. "I need to find out if my ex-husband's hiding money," she said, cutting straight to the point. Mr. Cole's mouth twitched. "Hiding money's what rich men do best." He set the file down on her table, flipping it open to reveal a stack of financial records. "But nobody's perfect. Not even your Liam." The bell above the door of Emma's sweet relief jingled for what felt like the 100th time that morning, but Emma didn't look up. She was elbow-deep in dough, her fingers kneading with a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing over the past 3 months. The tiny bakery, little more than a storefront with an oven and a cash register, had started as a prop, a stage set for Liam to laugh at from a distance. But somewhere along the way, between the pre-dawn baking sessions and the regulars who came in just to chat, it had become something real. A throat cleared in front of her. Emma wiped her hands on her apron and looked up, then froze. "Tiffany." Liam's new girlfriend stood on the other side of the counter, her designer sunglasses perched on top of her perfectly highlighted hair, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently against the glass display case. She wrinkled her nose at the modest selection of pastries, as if the sight of something so ordinary offended her. "This is what you're doing now," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Liam told me you'd open some little shop, but I didn't realize it was quite this quaint." Emma forced a smile. "Can I help you with something, Tiffany? Or did you just come by to admire the decor?" Tiffany's lips pursed. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see how the other half lives." She plucked a chocolate croissant from the case, examining it like it might be contaminated. "You know, Liam's doing amazingly well. That new deal with the Singapore investors? It's going to double his net worth." Emma's fingers tightened around the rolling pin. "Good for him." Tiffany took a delicate bite of the croissant, then paused, her eyebrows lifting in surprise. "It was good. Really good." Emma tried not to enjoy the moment too much. "You should stop by the house sometime," Tiffany said, recovering with a flip of her hair. "We've completely redone the kitchen. State of the art. Not that you'd know what to do with it." Emma was about to respond when the door chimed again. Mr. Cole stepped inside, his trench coat damp from the drizzle outside. He took one look at Tiffany, then at Emma, and raised an eyebrow. "Sorry," Emma said smoothly. "We're closing early today." Tiffany's gaze flicked between them, her smirk turning smug. "Oh, I see how it is. Well, don't let me interrupt your date." She dropped the rest of the croissant in the trash on her way out, the bell jingling sharply behind her. The second the door closed, Mr. Cole pulled a manila envelope from inside his coat. "You were right," he said, his voice low. "He's hiding money. A lot of it." Emma's breath caught as she flipped through the documents: bank statements, wire transfers, a shell company in the Caymans under a name she didn't recognize, but with signatures she knew all too well. Liam hadn't just lied in court. He'd committed fraud. Mr. Cole watched her, his expression unreadable. "There's more. He's been siphoning funds for years. That Singapore deal his girlfriend was bragging about? It's a sham. The money's coming from somewhere else." Emma traced a finger over one of the transfers, her heart pounding. Page 7 wasn't just her lifeline. It was his noose. She looked up, her voice steady. "How soon can we file?" Outside, the rain began to fall harder, tapping against the bakery's windows like fingers on a keyboard. Somewhere across town, Liam was probably laughing, smug in his victory. He wouldn't be laughing for long. The courthouse steps were slick with rain as Emma climbed them, her heels clicking against the stone with a steadiness she didn't feel. She clutched the strap of her bag tighter, the weight of Mr. Cole's file pressing against her side like a second heartbeat. Inside that folder was every lie, every hidden dollar, every smirk Liam thought he'd gotten away with, all laid bare in black and white. Sophia fell into step beside her, her crisp navy suit and polished briefcase a stark contrast to the last time they'd been here, when Emma had walked out with nothing but hollowed-out pride. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia murmured, casting a sideways glance at her. Emma didn't hesitate. "I've been ready for months." The doors swung open, and the hum of the courtroom washed over them, murmuring lawyers, shuffling papers, the low creak of wooden benches as spectators settled in. And there, at the defendant's table, Liam lounged in his $1,000 suit, one ankle propped lazily on his knee as he scrolled through his phone. Beside him, his lawyer leaned in to whisper something, and Liam's lips curled into a smirk. Then he saw Emma. His smirk faltered, just for a second. She held his gaze as she took her seat, her expression unreadable. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair and a voice that carried, called the room to order. "We're here to review new evidence in the matter of Reed versus Carter regarding the enforcement of the prenuptial agreement." She peered over her glasses at Liam's lawyer. "Counselor, I understand there's been an allegation of fraud?" Liam's lawyer stood, smooth as ever. "Your Honor, my client maintains that all assets were disclosed in good faith during the divorce proceedings. Ms. Reed's claims are baseless." Sophia didn't even wait for him to finish. She stood, her heels clicking against the floor as she approached the bench with a file in hand. "Your Honor, if I may." She opened the folder, sliding a single sheet across the desk. "This is a wire transfer from Mr. Carter's primary business account to an offshore holding company dated 6 months before the divorce was filed. The amount? $2 million. And it's just the beginning." Liam's chair scraped back as he shot to his feet. "That's a private investment. It has nothing to do with—" The judge held up a hand, silencing him. She flipped through the pages Sophia had provided, her frown deepening with each one. Emma watched Liam's face as the truth unfolded in real time, the tightening of his jaw, the flicker of panic in his eyes as the judge's expression darkened. "Mr. Carter," the judge said slowly, "would you care to explain why these accounts weren't disclosed during the asset division?" Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. His lawyer stepped in smoothly, but the damage was done. Sophia wasn't finished. "Your Honor, under the terms of the prenuptial agreement, page 7, Section 4, any material misrepresentation of assets voids the protections Mr. Carter previously enjoyed." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We're asking the court to enforce the penalty clause." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Liam's face drained of color. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "After reviewing the evidence, I'm inclined to agree. Mr. Carter, you'll produce full financial records, all of them within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges." She turned to Emma, her gaze softening just a fraction. "As for the penalty clause, I see no reason not to enforce it." Liam's voice was a strangled hiss. "What?" Emma didn't smile. Not yet. But as she met Liam's stunned glare across the room, she let him see it with the quiet, unshakable certainty in her eyes. He'd underestimated her. And now? Now he'd pay. The rain had turned into a downpour by the time Liam stormed out of the courthouse, his expensive Italian loafers splashing through puddles as if they were personally responsible for his ruin. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket calls from his lawyers, his business partners, his panicked accountant, but he ignored them all, his mind racing with a single, searing thought that had been burning through him since the judge's gavel had fallen. Emma had won. Not just won. Humbled him. His driver stood waiting by the curb, umbrella in hand, but Liam shoved past him, yanking open the door of his black Mercedes himself. The leather seat creaked as he collapsed into it, his fingers gripping the steering wheel like he wanted to rip it clean off. "Sir?" His driver hovered uncertainly. "You're 3 o'clock with the investors." "Cancel it," Liam snarled. The drive back to his penthouse was a blur of honking horns and swerving lanes, his knuckles white the entire way. He barely remembered parking, barely registered the elevator ride up. All he could see was Emma's face in that courtroom, the way she'd looked at him. Not with anger. Not even with triumph. With pity. The penthouse door slammed behind him with a force that made the crystal glasses in the cabinet rattle. Tiffany, lounging on the sofa in a silk robe, barely glanced up from her magazine. "How'd it go?" Liam didn't answer. He stalked to the bar, pouring himself a whiskey with hands that shook. Tiffany's brow furrowed. "Liam?" "She gets half," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Half of everything. The accounts. The properties. The company." Tiffany's magazine slipped from her fingers. "What?" "That goddamn prenup." He hurled a glass across the room, where it shattered against the marble fireplace. Tiffany flinched. For a long moment, the only sound was the ragged pull of Liam's breathing. Then, slowly, Tiffany stood. "Well," she said, her voice clipped, "I suppose that changes things." Liam turned, his eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tiffany was already gathering her things. Her purse, her shoes, the diamond bracelet he'd bought her last month. "It means I didn't sign up to be with a man who's about to lose half his net worth." She shrugged, her expression cold. "You're not the only one who reads contracts, Liam." The door clicked shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty penthouse. Liam stood there, alone, the weight of it all crashing down: the money, the pride, the sheer audacity of Emma's revenge. And then his phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, his stomach twisting as he read the notification, a news alert, already spreading like wildfire through the business blogs. Prominent CEO Liam Carter ordered to surrender half his assets to ex-wife in stunning court ruling. Beneath it, the comments rolled in, a tidal wave of schadenfreude. "Karma's a bitch. Guess he should have read the fine print. Does anyone know if his ex is single?" Liam's vision blurred. Somewhere across the city, Emma was probably sitting in her little bakery, surrounded by the smell of sugar and warmth, watching her life, her real life, begin anew. And he had nothing. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows of Emma's new beachfront property, Liam's beachfront property, technically, or at least it had been before the judge's ruling turned it into hers. She curled her toes into the plush rug beneath her feet, a cup of steaming coffee cradled in her hands as she gazed out at the ocean waves rolling onto the shore. The salt-kissed breeze carried the distant cry of seagulls, and for the first time in years, Emma felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. The bakery, Emma's sweet relief, was thriving. What had started as a prop in her revenge plot had become a beloved neighborhood staple, with lines stretching down the block on weekends. The car she'd taken from Liam, a sleek, silver convertible he'd adored more than he'd ever adored her, sat in the driveway, gleaming in the sunlight. And the money? Well, she donated a sizable chunk to a women's shelter downtown, a decision that had made the local news and, if the rumors were true, had made Liam's blood pressure spike. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Sophia's name flashed across the screen. "You seeing this?" Attached was a link to a business magazine's latest headline. Liam Carter steps down amid financial scandal. Investors pull out after offshore accounts revealed. Emma sipped her coffee, her lips curling into a small, satisfied smile. The doorbell rang. She padded through the sunlit hallway, pulling open the door to find Mr. Cole standing on the porch, a box of her own pastries in hand. "Housewarming gift," he said gruffly, thrusting the box at her. Emma laughed. "You bought me my own cookies? Figured you'd appreciate the irony." His sharp eyes scanned the house behind her. "You deserve this. All of it." Emma's smile softened. "I know." And she did. Because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about rebuilding. About taking the life Liam had tried to strip away and making it better than he ever could have imagined. Her phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Emma." Liam's voice was ragged, stripped of its usual arrogance. "We need to talk." Emma didn't hesitate. "No, Liam. We really don't." She hung up, blocking the number before dropping the phone back onto the counter. Mr. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Trouble?" Emma took a cookie from the box, biting into it with a contented hum. "Not anymore." Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, relentless and unstoppable. Just like her.